The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Reproduction or dissemination, other than for the purpose of education or information without the express written permission of the Phoenix Research Institute or Nova Society Media, is strictly prohibited.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we will be answering listener emails. We have a question from Landon, who lives in The Hague in Netherlands, and Landon asks, Trump's Secretary of State is skipping the meetings with the EU, the UK, and Ukrainian representatives. VP Vance says that the U.S. has made proposals for peace, and unless there is agreement, the U.S. will walk away. Does Vance have this much authority? Is the U.S. abandoning Ukraine? Is this a sign that the U.S. will no longer engage in world politics? Why do you think the U.S. would do this? Great questions, Landon. We'll see what we can do with them.
What are
your thoughts?
All the way from The Hague, huh?
All the way from The Hague.
Wow. Well, thank you for listening to us, and hopefully none of this is going to get lost in the translation. This morning, Trump put out a rather long tweet. Doesn't appear to be his because it doesn't have a lot of capital letters in it. Oh, there is one. Get it done in capital letters. And what he's basically saying is that he was angry about Zelensky. Apparently wrote a op-ed on the first page of the Wall Street Journal today that says that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea, and there's nothing to talk about here. So this was Rubio the other day said, we may have to just walk away from these talks. Trump has said, yes, if we can't make progress, we're going to walk away from these talks. I don't know what Vance has to do with any of it. Some people say that Vance is a consequential vice president in that he gets listened to. But what Vance did do was he outlined a plan for the end of the war, which basically amounts to Ukraine surrendering. And I don't think Ukraine is ready to surrender. If Trump really wanted to walk away from these talks, the smart move for him to do, if he really wants to end the war sooner rather than later, would be to provide arms and help and military aid, intelligence, etc., to the Ukrainians, and to dispel the notion that Putin has that Trump is on his side. Because Putin clearly was waiting for Trump to get back into office, and that Trump would be able to, as he bragged, and he probably did it in private to Putin, he did it outwardly to the rest of us, that he's going to end this war with one phone call and tell Ukraine that it's time for you to surrender. And Ukraine has not done that. And Europe has stepped up a little bit more than they had before, which was more than us anyway. And that they're not ready to give up even Crimea or certainly the other provinces that Russia has invaded. And it's really, I think, telling that that if Trump can't get a deal where Ukraine surrenders, he's not going to get a deal. So, as I said, the thing to do would be to support Ukraine and turn this back around on Putin again, as Biden had done, and oppose his moves, and keep pressure on Putin to make it a deal. I don't even know what the deal is. Really, just Putin leaving altogether, and to stop this crazy plan that he has to revive the Russian Empire, which is in nobody's best interest but Russia's.
No, the question of does Vance have this authority? Really, I don't know. This is such a screwed up administration. It's hard to keep track of who's actually in charge of what at this point in time. If Elon Musk had said it, it probably had just as much weight as if Vance says it. So it is a little difficult to kind of figure that out as you just watch this administration go in a tailspin, and it just seems there's very little direction, and you can almost see the lack of leadership that exists. Even though some people are saying, "Oh no, everything's going fine," I can't see that it is. Usually, a vice president wouldn't make a statement like this. That would be something that would be left to the president to make. And just the fact that Vance seemed to think it was okay to do, and nobody seemed to push back onto him, I don't know. Does this mean that the United States is backing out of world politics? I believe that the current administration, that's exactly what they want to do. They're only interested in economics. What they don't understand is, and it's, again, the fact that nobody seems to understand it, you cannot be involved in world economics if you're also not involved in world politics. Economics and politics go hand in hand when we're talking about a globalized world. So you just can't say, well, I want to trade with you, but I'm going to ignore the problems that you have. That does not work. That's why U.S. aid was so important, is gaining those relationships. That's why you can't have a trade war with the second largest economy in the world, China, and expect everything to be hunky-dory. And that's why when we talked about this in a previous podcast, that's why Taiwan is so important. You can't just back away from that. You can't do it. If you think that you're going to bargain that away to get a better deal with China, well, that tells me that not only are you backing out of influence in the world, you're also backing out of your responsibilities and basically saying economics is the only thing that the United States is interested in. And if that's the case, we're in trouble, because we have alliances that are economic, but they're also political. They're also geopolitical. And to have a successful economic policy, to have a successful economic engine that helps the country, you have got to embrace the rest of the world, because we can't do it all. We can't just trade with ourselves. We are not going to get the deal that is always best for us. And I know that Scott and I have both said this before, that crying that we're being unfairly treated when we have the highest standard of living in the world is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That is just stupid. How did you get to the highest standard of living in the world if you're being so screwed over by everybody all the time? That would be my question. And the fact is nobody can seem to give me that answer that's coherent. I hear a lot of baloney that comes out of a lot of people that tells me why that's the case. But the fact is that, no, I'm sorry, we do pretty well for ourselves. We do pretty well. And the idea of us abandoning Ukraine, which I can see it is yes, it should be a huge concern, I saw in the news the other day, Estonia is starting to build up its military for fear that once Ukraine falls, they're next. And then what next? Lithuania? I mean, the Baltics, that's what we're looking at here. It does not stop. It just does not stop at Ukraine. It is never going to be enough. And unless we're involved, and here's the thing, Europe could get involved and stop this. They're building themselves up. They may be able to fend this off themselves without us. And if they find out that they can, you know what they're going to turn around and say is, what the hell do we need those guys for? And maybe they're going to say to themselves, you know what? We don't need those guys anymore. Let's just ignore them. And anybody thinks that's making America great again, I'm sorry, you're living in a different universe than truly exists.
Well, especially when we're treating people who come here to visit and on vacation the way we are. There was a recent story that I heard about, like, 2 young women, German tourists. They were They visited several countries, I think Australia, New Zealand, then they came to Hawaii, and they were going to stay for 5 weeks and then go on to California. And they had booked a hotel for part of their stay in Hawaii, but they wanted to travel around the various islands, I believe, not just is it Oahu is the largest island? I'm not sure. But they weren't sure exactly where they were going to be on what island and where on what part of what island during their 5 week tour, because they wanted to go hiking, they wanted to do this, they wanted to do that. They were picked up and deported. They were held for, I'm not sure for how long, and then deported because they did not have their hotel booked for the entire stay. And they were sent back to Germany. They just graduated from the gymnasium, from secondary school, and this was their way of treating themselves before going on to university. I mean, if this is how we're going to be behaving toward Europeans and German citizens, they're simply here to have a good time and explore, they're going to spend their money elsewhere. Canadians don't want to come here. They've canceled rental houses and vacations and selling their houses that they've owned here for a long time. People are going elsewhere. I mean, this is billions of dollars in tourism and warnings from governments around the world not to come here. So yeah, if Europe can attend to Putin themselves, and yeah, I agree. I mean, Poland is at risk. All the countries there are at risk.
Yeah. And look, Brooke, just to circle back to
Yeah,
the question
please.
here, I think the world has forgotten in some respects what Putin's goal is here. It's not to grab pieces of territory in Ukraine. It is to wipe Ukraine off the map and make it part of Russia, which would make Russia um, a step closer to having an empire and a Christian one. Don't ever forget that part of it, because I think it really is very meaningful to Putin, who in some ways is apparently a very religious man, and that he wants a Russian empire to be a Christian empire, not a Muslim empire, as it would be if he were to um, inhale all the stands out there in Asia, the Asian part of Russia, of the former Soviet Union, rather. Um, and so that when you start talking about making deals and stuff like that, which the Trump people are doing, you're walking down a path that does not exist. All it is a temporary standoff. All it is a temporary measure to stop the hostilities so that Russia can regroup itself to attack again at some later date. There is no chance that Putin is going to be satisfied with Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, the rest of it, those provinces that he has already, and that would be the end of it. It is just not. It's not what his goal is, and it is not going to be enough for him. So it would be ridiculous to for us to say, for Vance to say, hey, Ukraine, accept this as the deal, because this is the deal. It's ridiculous for Trump to say it. It's ridiculous for Rubio to say it, because it doesn't get Putin what he wants, and he's not going to stop until he's stopped from getting it. And Mark brought up the Europeans before. The Europeans are kind of talking about putting pockets of troops in Ukraine. Bad move, really bad move. Let Ukraine fight this battle with as much support as we can get them, and let's not escalate this war any further, which is what the Europeans are talking about essentially. And that didn't work in the Balkans. It's not working here. So I really do think that I don't think it's going to happen that Trump begins to support Ukraine again the way that Biden did, or maybe if he was critical of Biden's support, even more so, right? Giving them more weapons, giving them more intelligence than Biden was willing to do it. Biden was trying to manage the war. If Trump really wanted Ukraine to win this thing, he could make that happen probably by giving them weapons that Biden wouldn't give them and having them fight Putin. But he's clearly not going to do that because he's clearly in the camp of Putin. And he denies it again here in this tweet that he sent out this morning. I have nothing to do with Russia, but I have much to do with wanting to save, on average, 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. The statement made by Zelensky today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, in quotes, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal with a capital D, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done in all caps. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would have never started if I was president. So just the whole thing is like, this only happened because Biden won the election in 2020. He goes back to President Barack Hussein Obama giving up Crimea. I mean, basically, we put sanctions on Russia. I don't think we were going to start bombing them. I don't think we were going to invade Russia because they took Crimea. He says nobody is asking Zelensky to recognize Crimea as a Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? Well, again, that's not true. But Zelensky wasn't the president of Russia at that time. But there was only so much that they could actually do. If there was a possibility of splitting Crimea in half to give Russia a part of Crimea with a base that they could have, there's a clean line that you could split right down the middle of Ukraine, where the Russian part is closer to Russia and the Ukrainian part is closer to Ukraine, and like that would be an old-fashioned European-made compromise. But again, it's not what Russia wants. It's not what Putin wants. Putin wants Ukraine gone. And whether it happens today or this year or it happens 10 years from now, as long as he's alive, Ukraine is at risk. This war only ends really with Putin's death because Putin is the one in Russia who's pushing this. And I don't know if the next Russian leader is going to have the same desire to reconstitute the Russian empire that Putin has. Why don't we find out, But boy, I have nothing further to say about this, but it's such a crazy Trump scheme to get us talking about a deal, whether there's going to be a good deal or a bad deal or whatever, when a deal is not what is going to end this. It's not, there's no deal.
No, and there have been treaties between Zelensky and also previous Ukrainian leaders and Putin has violated every single one. And
Right.
what did Trump say? Well, he hasn't violated any deal with me. So, yeah, but that is meaningless. You have to look at how Putin has treated everybody else. But of course, Trump thinks he's all special and whatnot. Although Putin has violated every single ceasefire that he and Trump have discussed and whatever else. But of course, Trump has done nothing about that except blame Zelensky for it.
Blame Zelensky, blame Obama, blame Biden, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blame everybody but himself.
Yep.
And misunderstand the entire situation or obfuscate the entire situation and not acknowledge what is really at stake here. And this is the most Trumpy thing ever, and if it wasn't for his complete one-sidedness, whatever it's based on, to Putin, it would be a whole lot easier to just say, to understand the situation. If Trump, as I've said before, I'm not one of these people who thinks that Trump is a Russian asset, but I do wish he would do more to dispel that notion.
I totally agree with that. I guess we hit that one pretty good.
Fairly long. All right. Next, Brooke.
Yeah, so I wanted to thank our listener for the question, and I do hope that we answered all parts of your questions. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to all our listeners for your support and your questions. Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or a comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly repository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.